Good afternoon. I'm not sure where you are from, so I guess have a good day. It's better. I'm Anastasia and I will be your host, but we still have some time before to start, so let's wait patiently. And remember to have, during the presentation, to have your microphones muted, so there will be a better reception for you guys. Right now, I'm going to give my voice over to Andreas. Andreas, are you ready?
I am ready, indeed.
So I hope that that the quick and short presentation about what we do as a company was helpful for you. And now for the main event, Andreas, I'm giving the rest to you. Your microphone is muted.
So that's better now.
Yes.
And I would like to share my screen. I am Andreas Grabitz. Please, if you have any questions to me, just say Andy. I think it's easier for most of you than to pronounce Andreas. That's a bit complicated. I'm Andy. I'm working for Eurofins since 2005, so since roughly 16 years now. I've been involved in different functions within Eurofins, and since 2018, so around 2 years now, I'm heading the Department of Packaging Materials in Hamburg. So I'm located in the northern part of Germany. Okay, yeah, for the final part of today and yesterday's training, I'm touching a bit a dangerous area. Dangerous because halal is has something to do with religious requirements, with something about the Muslimic world, and you are much closer to all these issues about the Islam than I am. So please apologize if something I explain now is probably not fully correct, or if some of my translations are probably not fully appropriate. I try to do my very best. Here on the right side, you can see that especially for food products, halal is, of course, a very important requirement, and that a lot of products, especially in the Western world and in Europe, are certified according to the halal requirements. I guess that in Saudi Arabia, in Pakistan, or in Bahrain, it is rather self-explaining that foodstuff is halal, while this is for sure not true in Europe or in the United States, and therefore we have a huge market in Europe and in the United States for halal certification. So we know that there are more than 100 commercial certification organizations which do halal certifications. So actually, what does halal mean? What is the expression? What is the meaning of this word? And as far as I understood, discussions with people speaking Arabian, and also reading about the internet, halal is something like allowed, or is approved, is something being allowed or approved. So this means halal is a phrase that can cover all and everything. So which is from an Islamic perspective compliant with the Quran requirements. And to be honest, I'm not really familiar with the content of the Quran, so what is all covered by requirements in the Quran. But what is quite clear is that there are, in terms of food, there are certain requirements which are relevant, which need to be considered, and based on that, also some requirements can be derived for food packaging, and this is should be the topic of my last presentation today. The contrast, the direct opposite to halal is haram. Haram is an adjective which described everything that is allowed, that is a taboo. And these two phrases are very, very important to understand the concept of halal food and of halal food packaging. We have a series of standards which describe requirements for halal products, especially for halal food products. So we have one, let's say, more superordinate standard, which is for all the Islamic countries, organizations, and the Islamic Conference. This is an OIC standard from 2011, general guidelines on halal food. One which is more going into detail about the processes and about specific requirements is the Indonesian and is the Malaysian standard. Indonesian standard 220 3201, requirement for halal materials, and the Malaysian standard 1500. To be honest, I'm not fully aware why, but the European certification bodies for halal food are very, very often referencing the Malaysian standard. This is the most common halal standard with our customers. So we are not personally doing halal certification as we simply are not familiar with these requirements. But a lot of our customers from the food packaging industry use other certification bodies to certify their materials according to the halal requirements. And the Malaysian standard 1500 is the most common ones. Actually, we also have some standards, again, in the Gulf states. The corresponding to these two here above is probably the 2055 for halal food requirements and food for halal food certification bodies. And we have also one standard which is more into the direction of animal slaughtering, but which is not really relevant for packaging materials. I will go a bit more into the detail of this animal slaughtering issue later on. We had an activity, we had an initiative in Europe, a CEN initiative. CEN is the organization which is developing standards in Europe. So the EN standards are derived and developed by CEN. And CEN has started an initiative in 2010, as far as I remember, to develop a halal food standard also applicable for Europe, but simply due to financial problems. So they had a lack of funding organizations and funding countries. These activities were stopped in 2014. So it was not finalized. So in the, I would say, in the northern and western hemisphere, we nowadays have no halal standards, no halal requirements, but they are completely established and derived in the Saudi Arabian area. So Gulf states, Malaysia and Indonesia. So as mentioned, as the Malaysian standard 1500 from 2009 is the most important one, and actually the fundamental structure of these standards is very, very similar. Therefore, I focus at the moment on 15,000 from the Malaysian standard. And I have shown you here the table of content. So how is it organized? And what you can see here is a very common common content list of a table of content. We have halal requirements, you remember, for the production, preparation, handling, and storage of food. So it is not a packaging standard. So we don't have in none of these Islamic countries, we don't have anywhere a a standard which is specifically addressing packaging requirements. But all of these things I now explain are derived from the food standards. But what you can see here under the requirements in chapter 3, we have requirements on the management responsibilities, on the premises, so the factories where food is produced, on the devices, utensils, machines, and processing aids, on the hygiene, sanitation, and food safety, and the processing of halal food. And now we have something about packaging, labeling, and advertising of halal food. So here indeed we have some fundamental requirement where we can have a bit a deeper look into that. And this is here in 3.7. You can see that halal food shall be suitably be packed. Packaging material shall be halal in nature and shall fulfill the following requirement. The packaging material shall not be made from any raw material that are decreed as najis. Apologize if this is probably not correctly pronounced. Najis is, as far as I've learned, is a term for a product or an act, a ritual, which is not halal, which is not clean in the purpose or in the sense of the Quran. In other words, any type of packaging material must be manufactured and must be used exclusively from materials which are in compliance with the Quran. So now everybody can think, so packaging is usually made from a plastic material or from a metal, from a paper. Where can there be a contradiction to the Quran laws? This is not really clear from the very beginning. To finalize this, we have nothing else. So all of these standards simply say packaging for halal food must also be halal, and the requirement is that it must be in compliance with the Sharia or the Quran law. We don't have anywhere a deeper description or a more detailed description which ingredients in a packaging could be halal or najis, or how to properly assess or how to certify a packaging according to halal requirements. There is no definition at all. We have in Indonesia, we have a list of materials. So the Indonesian Council of Ulama has published or has developed a list of materials which are halal. So in this list, we find some materials which are also used for packaging materials and which can be helpful to start this assessment. This is not a list which is exclusively for packaging. So we also find food ingredients, certain animal products in that. But beside that, we also find a few materials which are helpful. And the first is here under point 21. We see that the Indonesian Council has declared that all type of polymers, polyethylene, polypropylene, polystyrene, they are generally considered as being halal. So they are in compliance with the Quran requirements. And this also makes fully sense, as they are derived from synthetic petroleum. So there is nothing which, at least from my understanding, there is nothing which could interfere with the requirements of the Quran. The second is that we have, but unfortunately we only have 3 antioxidants here. This is BHA, BHT, and TBHQ. At least the BHT is often used also in packaging, so this might be also safe. And of course also all the synthetic antioxidants can be used, as they have the same artificial source than the polymer itself has. Yeah, that's for the antioxidants. But we only have these 3 antioxidants in this list. Then we have a list of organic acids. They also are partly used, like the ascorbate is an approved antioxidant. Benzoates are approved antioxidants in the plastic regulation, so they might also be used. And last but not least, we have some solvents which are allowed: hexane, propylene glycol, and also triclosan is a preservative which is sometimes used as a preservative for printing inks, or which is also can be used in adhesives. So here we have a very limited list of substances which are clearly approved by the Indonesian Council of Ulama as being halal. To be honest, it is a starting point, especially for the plastics, for the polymer itself. It is helpful, but for all the others, it is not really bringing us forward, as we need a lot more substances which to manufacture a packaging material, and there are substances which can cause problems. The problems are these substances which are derived usually from animal sources. So we have approved mono and diglycerides, we have fatty acids, we have stearates, we have glycerine, fats and oils of animal origin, and we have gelatin, which are commonly used in the manufacturing of packaging materials. And the issue is that within the supply chain, from the manufacturer of these raw materials, the suppliers of these manufacturers, through the whole chain until these products end in your factory, they usually have no traceability from which slaughterhouse these products were originally coming, because simply due to the prices of these products, these are residues from slaughtering. So, and in the, at least in Europe, this is in very most cases, this is slaughtering of pigs. And these fatty acids, they are unbeatable cheap if they are extracted from the residues of slaughtering of pigs. Stearates is quite the same. So they can be derived also from stearates, for instance, from sunflowers, but then they are at least tenfold more in price compared to the residues from the slaughtering process. So all of these raw materials, which you can see here, are really a challenge to achieve them, or to achieve a halal certification for them, as the supply chain is usually not really transparent and not really clear. A bit in a different color, I mentioned the ethanol, the alcohol. You know that alcohol is also not allowed according to the Quran, and therefore ethanol might also be a problem. I will come back to that a bit later. From my perspective, this is a bit a different story. Therefore, I chose another color, so blue and green. So, but I will explain this a bit later on in more detail. So what the Quran says, that there are animals which are haram. You remember, haram are unclean animals, which are not allowed to be consumed by Islamic people, which are not in compliance with the Quran. And you see here, this is the more or less, I think a whole complete list. We have some animals here which I think are fully irrelevant, like birds of prey, eagles, hawks, crows, scorpions, rats, and so on. Nobody will derive a fat in an industrial scale from these animals. But we have here exactly the pigs, which are in the northern and in the western countries, are commercially used and slaughtered in very high amounts. And of course, they are also not slaughtered according to the slaughtering rules, according to the Islamic law, which you can see here. So, beside the fact that that it is completely forbidden, so going back here, it is completely forbidden if the if the fats, the fatty acids, the gelatin, glycerine, if they are, in case they are from pigs, this is completely a no-go. But furthermore, if they are, let's say, from cows, where we also have quite a lot of cows slaughtered in European or in American slaughterhouses, then these cows must also be slaughtered according to the Islamic law. And the slaughtering rules, according to the Islamic laws, are laid down in a claim from Imam Khomeini, which is referenced here. And here you can see the slaughterer needs to be a Muslim. So that's the first important issue, that either the slaughterer itself is a Muslim, or a non-Muslim is supervised by a Muslim. The neck of the animal must be cut in one cut using an iron tool with the right hand. Other materials are not acceptable. The animal must be oriented in the direction of the Muslim prayer prior to the slaughtering. Before or directly at slaughtering, the slaughterer needs to mention "in the name of Allah." And immediately after the slaughtering, clear evidence must be visible that the animal was alive before slaughtering, e.g. by blood drain or by remaining reflexes. So this means that these rules are more or less impossible to be fulfilled in European slaughter. I would not even say a slaughterhouse. These are slaughter factories. So these rules can't be fulfilled, and there is absolutely no supply chain of these products, these fatty acids, these glycerine, which are in accordance with the slaughtering rules and with the rules which are laid down in the Quran for such products. So here we have a range of substances, which I mentioned already in the table earlier, but we have much more. And you can see here in each of these lines that there is somewhere from animal origin listed here. So line number 12, acids, fatty from animal or vegetable food, fats and oils, 36, fats and oils from animal or vegetable food sources. So if this is really considered as relevant, that the packaging film needs to comply with the rules of the Quran, then there must be either a exclusively vegetable source of these materials. This is possible, as mentioned, or the manufacturer or the supplier of these materials must use only synthetic ingredients, synthetic additives, which do not have any natural source. There is no alternative to that, because otherwise the documentation, the traceability through the supply chain is the limiting factor, because it is simply not possible to get these products from an halal certified source. It is not possible. So we have discussed this. I will show you an example later on. We've discussed this with several raw material suppliers, like the huge petrochemical suppliers like Borealis, but even with the company Sabic, which is a Saudi Arabian company. They are not fully aware of the sources of their raw materials with respect to what you see here on the screen at the moment. Okay, the second part, which I mentioned earlier, is the alcohol issue. So alcohol is not allowed according to the Holy Quran. And there is one fatwa from an Indonesian, from Indonesia, which distinguish between khamr and ethanol. They say that anything that is intoxicating is considered as khamr. And drinks containing a minimum of 1% ethanol is categorized as khamr. So they say anything which has a content of less than 1% is acceptable. So this is what you can see here under clause 4. Drinks, those are produced through fermentation process containing less than 1% ethanol is not categorized as khamr, but is haram for consumption. Here they furthermore explain what this means in terms of the ethanol which is used especially for printing inks. So in printing inks we have very, very often ethanol as a solvent. And here they also say that ethanol produced by a khamr industry is not najis, so it's not unclean. So this is acceptable. This 1% level is helping us very, very much as a packaging material which is finished and which is printed is usually having a residual ethanol content which is far, far below this 1%. I found another another source or another fatwa from Singapore, where they said that natural or synthetic ethanol as a solvent is allowed as long as it is not produced from prohibited products. And the content of ethanol in the flavoring should not exceed 0.5, and then the end product should not exceed 0.1%. While a fatwa from Malaysia, they said that the rate should not exceed 0.5%. So there are different interpretation how much alcohol is allowed. All of them agree that the source of the ethanol should be a non-prohibited product. That's clear, but they all have, let's say, something like a threshold. The threshold varies a bit, but that in practice, this is not really a problem, as the residual content of ethanol in a printed product is usually not really high. So even with this 0.1% from this Singapore fatwa, we usually have no problem, because a properly dried film is the content is lower than 0.1%. Yeah, that's about the ethanol. This is more a theoretical issue. We have these fatwas, these threshold limits in place, and for very, very most of our products, where we also measured the ethanol content, we see that we are even below the 0.1%. So in practice, this is not really a significant problem. Here is an extract of the Saudi Arabian standard, or of the, sorry, it is not Saudi Arabia specific, it is GSO. So it is a Gulf standard again from the Gulf area. Here we have quite the same. So the requirements for slaughtering, for the facilities, for the processes, the labeling, they do not differ very, very much between the different standards. So that is rather comparable. You see here the slaughterer, the animal should not be on halal list. Dead animals, pigs, etc. There must be a Muslim, or a Jewish or Christian, which is supervised by a Muslim. So this is fully identical. It's just another example. The GSO 2055. This is what I also mentioned in my introduction. Is what you can see here. We also have packaging and wrapping materials requirement shall be free from any non-halal or these najis materials. But that's it. Packaging and wrapping shall not be prepared and manufactured by equipment that is contaminated. So please keep it clean. Please keep it halal. That's it. But despite of this small part of the ethanol, of the alcohol, we don't have any instructions, any guidance, which will be helpful to fix concrete details, how to certify, how to assess a halal packaging material. Yeah, here are again the species. And as I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of certification bodies, very, very often outside of the of the Islamic world, as especially outside of the Arabic world. It is important for Muslims to distinguish between halal food and non-halal food. Therefore, there is much more need for halal certification. This World Halal Union here, this is a label from this is the biggest certification body in the world. It is located in New York in the United States. This is the most important one here in Germany. And all of them, they told me that the only way to really achieve a halal certified packaging is to use raw materials all through the supply chain, which are from synthetic sources. That's the only way, because as mentioned, the supply chain of natural raw materials, so be it whether this is from animal sources or from plant sources, is fully independent. But the supply chain is not in a position to have a traceability through the supply chain. So there is no alternative to confirm, to ask the manufacturers for fully synthetic raw materials. Then you can be sure that the packaging material is also halal. And this is an example by one of the big European suppliers of polyethylene and polypropylene. The company is called Borealis. And what they do is, this is what you can see here. This is the halal certification. This product does not have an official halal certification. We certify that manufacturing this product, we do not use or intentionally add into any substance of animal origin or drinkable alcohol. So that's simply the summary of all these issues, whether halal is, how to certify halal, or to assess the suitability of a packaging according to halal requirements. Easy, final. Myself again, and my team. And Natalia, I think we have a bit more of time. If there are questions, I'm more than happy to answer if possible.